The Bluetooth glitch turned my car into a listening device. Instead of a grocery list, Evan's voice boomed through the speakers. "I am finalizing the divorce," he announced. His friends roared with laughter as he added, "She signed everything." 18 months of marriage dissolved in 10 seconds of cruel mockery. I sat in the freezing parking lot, dry-eyed. I realized then that I was not a wife losing a husband. I was a target who had finally woken up. My name is Brianna Kessler. I was sitting in a grocery store parking lot in Charlotte when my life ended. Or rather, the lie I had been living ended. I had just pulled my phone out to check a reminder for almond milk and detergent. The screen flickered, struggling with the erratic Bluetooth connection that Evan promised to fix 3 months ago. Suddenly, the speakers of my SUV crackled to life. It was not a podcast. It was a live feed. "I am finalizing the divorce." The voice was unmistakable. Evan, my husband. I froze, my finger hovering over the disconnect button. I should have pressed it. I should have saved myself the humiliation, but I did not. I sat there as the interior of my car filled with the raucous, braying laughter of his friends. It sounded like they were watching a sitcom. And, apparently, I was the punchline. "Cheers to freedom," a male voice shouted, followed by the clinking of glass and the dull roar of a crowded bar in the background. Then came a voice that cut through the noise like a serrated knife. "Tessa, his sister, just make sure you do not forget the asset clause." My blood ran cold. "She signed it already," Evan said, his voice dripping with arrogant confidence. "It is just the final transfer left." The silence inside my car was deafening. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt the oxygen being sucked out of the cabin, leaving me in a vacuum of pure shock. I stared through the windshield at a woman pushing a cart full of groceries, laughing at something on her phone. She looked so normal. I felt like an alien species. My mind rewound through the last 18 months of our marriage. It played back like a highlight reel of my own stupidity. I thought about the night he convinced me to sign the refinancing agreement. He had massaged my shoulders, whispering about how we were building an empire together. I thought about the joint credit cards. I thought about the mortgage loan that had to be in my name because my credit score was pristine and his was supposedly tied up in complex investments. "It is just for the best rates." "Bree," he had said. I looked down at my left hand. The diamond on my ring finger caught the afternoon sun. For the first time, I did not see a symbol of eternal love. I saw a padlock, a wax seal on a document. I realized that the ring was not a gift. It was a distraction. They did not just want a divorce. They wanted a scapegoat. I took a slow, shaky breath. The panic that had threatened to rise in my throat was suddenly replaced by something else, something colder, harder. "Okay," I whispered to the empty car. "Just treat me like a fool." I was done being the loving wife. I was done being the safety net. If they wanted a war over assets and clauses, they were going to get one, but they would not see it coming. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady now. I typed a single message to Evan. "I heard you. We will talk later." I hit send. Then, immediately, I swiped down and turned off my notifications. I flipped the phone face down on the passenger seat. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me type, delete, and type again. I would not let him measure my pain by how quickly I responded to his inevitable panic. I started the engine. The radio remained off. I did not need noise anymore. I needed a plan. I pulled into the driveway of our townhouse, a structure Evan loved to show off to his colleagues. It was a beige monument to what he called modern elegance and what I now recognized as expensive sterility. The interior was filled with white boucle furniture and glass tables that terrified guests. We had coasters that were never used because we never actually sat in the living room to drink coffee. We just staged it. It was a house designed for a real estate listing photo, not for a human life. Evan came home an hour later. He walked through the front door with the practiced ease of a man who thought the script was going exactly as he had written it. He loosened his tie, walked over to where I was standing in the kitchen, and pressed a kiss to my forehead. It was dry and precise. It felt less like a gesture of affection and more like a stamp of approval on a package ready for shipping. "Hey," he said, pulling back just enough to study my face. "You had me worried with that text earlier. Is everything okay?" I looked into his eyes. There was absolutely no warmth there. He was scanning me for cracks. He was checking to see if the asset me was still stable enough to liquidate. If I showed too much independence, I would become a liability. I forced my shoulders to slump, mimicking the posture of the defeated, confused wife he expected me to be. "I am sorry," I said, letting my voice waver just enough to sound pathetic. I have been so stressed about the finances. The accounts look so messy to me, and I am terrified I am going to make a mistake with the tax filings." The tension drained from his shoulders instantly. It was terrifying to watch. He did not comfort me because he cared. He relaxed because my anxiety fit his narrative. He was a predator who had just confirmed the prey was limping. "Oh, honey," he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing register I used to mistake for security. "You do not need to worry about that. I told you. I am handling the restructuring. It is all standard procedure. Just trust me." He went upstairs to change into his running clothes. I waited until I heard the shower running before I moved. I walked into his home office. It was messy, unlike the rest of the house. He was careless here because he thought I was too stupid to look, or perhaps too trusting to pry. The large laser printer in the corner had a blinking red light. It was a paper jam. I opened the tray and gently pulled out the crumpled sheet that had caused the error. It was not a work document. It was a timeline. Sign post-settlement addendum. Transfer vehicle, close. And there, scrawled at the top in aggressive, jagged blue ink, was Tessa's handwriting. "Keep her calm. No independent counsel." The air left my lungs. But this time, it was not from shock. It was from clarity. They did not just want to end the marriage. If they simply wanted to leave, they would have filed papers and fought in court like normal people. This was different. They needed the timeline to be perfect. They needed me to sign that addendum before the divorce was finalized. They were planning to dump the toxic debt on me while they walked away with the clean assets. I folded the paper and slipped it into the waistband of my yoga pants. I sat down at my laptop and opened a new folder on the desktop. I named it Photos 2018, inside that innocuous shell. I created a hidden subfolder named Evidence. I started scanning everything I could find. I took photos of the timeline. I downloaded bank statements he had left open on the shared browser. I could have screamed. I could have run upstairs and thrown the paper in his face while he was still wet from the shower. But that is what a victim would do. A victim reacts. I was done reacting. I sat there, listening to the water running through the pipes above my head, and made a decision. I would not confront him. Not tonight. You do not light the match until you have mapped out exactly where the fire will burn. I was going to let him think he was winning until the very moment I locked the door. I am a senior analyst at Harborline Risk and Compliance. My entire career is built on a single cynical premise: people lie. But audit trails do not. When I walk into a boardroom, I do not listen to the CEO's charismatic speech. I look at the footnotes in the ledger. I look for the anomalies in the timestamps. So, when I sat down at my desk the morning after the incident in the parking lot, I did not cry. I went to work. I logged into the portal for our joint checking account. Most spouses look at the large withdrawals, but fraud is rarely a sledgehammer. It is usually a termite infestation. I filtered the transaction history for the last 12 months and sorted by frequency rather than amount. There it was, a recurring transfer of $350, then $400, then $275. The amounts varied just enough to look random, but the recipient was always the same Northgate Strategy LLC. I opened a new tab and ran a public records search. Northgate Strategy LLC was registered 6 months ago. The listed address was a mail drop in a strip mall in Delaware, a classic setup for a virtual office. I pulled up their website. It was a digital ghost town. It was filled with stock photos of diverse people shaking hands and empty buzzwords like synergy and global optimization. There was no team page. There were no client testimonials. It was a shell company designed to catch money and make it disappear. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, but I kept typing. I requested my personal credit report. My score was still high, which usually gave me comfort, but this time I scrolled down to the hard inquiries section. There was a ping from a bank I did not bank with, dated 3 weeks ago. Under open accounts, there was a new high-yield savings account opened in my name. I had never walked into that bank. I had never signed those papers. You bastard, I whispered, staring at the screen. I realized then that the stack of documents Evan had brought home last month, the ones he said were for refinancing the house to get a lower interest rate, must have included an application for this account. He had buried it in the middle of a 50-page packet, counting on my fatigue to keep me from reading the fine print. I did not save the files to my desktop. That was amateur hour. I took screenshots of the bank transfers, the corporate registration for Northgate, and the credit report. I printed hard copies on the secure office printer. During my lunch break, I drove to a credit union 3 towns over, paid cash for a small safety deposit box, and locked the physical evidence inside. Digital data can be wiped or corrupted, but paper in a steel box does not suffer from technical glitches. Back in my car, I put my headphones on and played the recording from the bar again. I did not listen as a heartbroken wife. I listened as a compliance officer reviewing a wiretap. She signed it already. Evan's voice said, "It is just the final transfer left." I hit pause. The final transfer. I replayed Tessa's voice. "Just make sure you do not forget the asset clause." It clicked. The timeline made sense. I was due to receive a settlement payment next week from a minor car accident I had been involved in 2 years ago. It was not a fortune, but it was roughly $80,000. Evan had been oddly helpful with the paperwork for it, insisting I sign a direction of funds form to deposit it directly into our investment account to avoid commingling issues. He was not trying to invest it. He was trying to intercept it. Northgate Strategy was likely the destination. I returned to the office and executed the digital backup plan. I saved the audio file and the document scans to an encrypted cloud server. I put a second copy on a USB drive, which I later hid inside a box of tampons in the downstairs bathroom, a place Evan would never look. Finally, I emailed the files to a new address I created under my maiden name, accessed only through a private browser window. I leaned back in my chair. I had the map of their crime. Now I needed to buy time. I picked up my phone and typed a text to Evan. I deliberately made my fingers tremble as I hit the keys, channeling every ounce of weakness I possessed. "Evan, I am so sorry I ran off. I am so confused and scared about money. Please do not be mad. I sent it. I knew exactly what he would see. A frightened, pliable woman who was terrified of losing her husband. He would relax. He would get sloppy. Greed always makes people careless when they think the victim is already bleeding out. Corinne Vance did not look like the lawyers on television. She did not have a mahogany desk or a view of the skyline. Her office was a small, windowless room in a shared workspace building, and she wore a suit that was tailored so sharply it looked like it could cut glass. She was not there to comfort me. She was there to dissect the problem. I sat down and placed my life on the metal table between us. I did not waste time with a tearful backstory. I laid out the items with the precision of a dealer dealing cards. First, the USB drive containing the audio from the parking lot. Second, the crumpled timeline I had pulled from the paper jam. Third, the bank statements showing the transfers to Northgate Strategy LLC. Finally, the credit report with the unauthorized inquiry. Corinne picked up the timeline. She did not blink. She studied it for a long minute. then moved to the bank statements. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. "This is not a standard divorce," Corinne said finally. Her voice was low and devoid of theatricality. "This is a corporate restructuring. They are building a house of cards. The plan is to shift the marital debt and the tax liabilities onto you right before the decree is signed. Meanwhile, they are siphoning liquid cash into Northgate Strategy. By the time the judge signs the papers, Evan will appear broke, and you will be insolvent." She looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. They were gray and unsettlingly intelligent. "People do not go to this much trouble for a standard middle-class split," she said. "Evan is aggressive, but this level of complexity suggests a specific target. Do you have family assets he knows about? Something that is not on the tax returns?" I froze. I had spent my entire adult life avoiding this question. My family— "We have a trust," I said, choosing my words carefully. "It is a private legacy trust. I am a co-signer for certain operational decisions. It is not something I talk about. My father taught me to live anonymously, to be invisible." Corinne leaned back. She tapped a pen against the table. "Does he know she asked? He might suspect," I admitted. "But he has never seen the paperwork." "He knows," Corinne corrected me. "Or at least, he knows enough to gamble. He is not just trying to steal your savings. Brianna, he is trying to force you into a position where you have to use that trust signature to bail yourself out. He wants the unlocking signature. If he controls you through debt, he controls the access to that trust." I felt a wave of nausea. It was worse than I thought. He was not just stripping the house, he was mining the foundation. "We need to stop him," I said. "No," Corinne said sharply. "We do not stop him. Not yet. If we confront him now, he will claim it is a misunderstanding. He will say Northgate is a bad investment he made by mistake. He will destroy the timeline. We need more than intent. We need proof of execution." She pressed a button on her desk phone. "Send Malik in." The door opened, and a man walked in. He was younger than me, wearing a hoodie and holding a laptop covered in stickers. He did not smile. He did not offer a hand. He sat down and opened his computer. "This is Malik Rowe," Corinne said. "He does not argue in court. He follows the data. If a dollar moves from point A to point B, Malik sees it. I need access to the Wi-Fi router logs from your home," Malik said. His voice was soft but fast. "And I need you to get me the serial number of any device Evan uses for work. If he is moving money to Northgate, he is leaving digital fingerprints. I will find them." Corinne looked at me. "You are going to go back home. You are going to continue playing the scared, confused wife. You are going to let them think the trap is working. We need them to feel safe enough to make the final transfer." I stood up. My legs felt steadier than they had in days. I gathered my purse, leaving the evidence with Corinne. "I can do that," I said. "Good," Corinne said, turning back to her files. I walked out of the building and into the bright sunlight. The world looked different now. It was no longer a place where bad things happened to me. It was a chessboard. As I unlocked my car, a thought settled in my mind, clear and cold. Do not fight in the dark. Wait until they are comfortable, then turn on the lights. I sat in my car outside my office and typed the message that I knew would act as the ultimate bait. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, appreciating the irony of what I was about to do. I was feeding the beast exactly what it wanted to hear. "Evan, I am terrified of a divorce. I want us to be completely financially transparent so we can save this marriage." The reaction was instantaneous. When I arrived home that evening, the house smelled of expensive takeout and fresh flowers. Evan was waiting in the kitchen with a bouquet of peonies, my favorite, though he had forgotten that for the last 3 birthdays. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. "I got your text," he murmured into my hair. "You are my rock, Bree. We are going to fix this. I promise." It was a masterclass in manipulation. If I had not heard his voice in that parking lot, I would have believed him. He played the role of the devoted, relieved husband perfectly. But now, when he touched me, I did not feel warmth. I felt the cold calculation of a man assessing his inventory. The next phase of their offensive began the following morning. Tessa called me, her voice dripping with synthetic sweetness. She insisted we needed a girls' day to decompress. She took me to a high-end spa downtown, paid for, I assumed, with money siphoned from my own accounts via Northgate Strategy. As we sat in the steam room, surrounded by white marble and the scent of eucalyptus, Tessa made her move. "You know, Brianna," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Evan is just so stressed about the market right now. He loves you so much, but the finances, they really weigh on him. It would help him if everything was just simplified." I leaned back, closing my eyes to hide the sharp alertness in them. I put on my best performance of the overwhelmed, fragile wife. "I know," I said, letting my voice sound small. "I hate reading those contracts. They give me such a headache. I just want it all to go away." I peeked through my eyelashes. Tessa was smiling. It was not a smile of sympathy. It was the smile of a burglar finding a window left unlocked. "Exactly," she said soothingly. "You should not have to worry your pretty head about legal jargon. Let Evan handle the structure. You just focus on healing." I decided to accelerate the timeline. We went to lunch afterward, and I waited until the waiter had poured our second glass of wine. The lawyer from the accident case called. I said casually, "The settlement is finally coming through next week. It is bigger than I thought. About $150,000. Tessa nearly choked on her salad. She dabbed her mouth with a napkin, her eyes wide. "That is amazing," she said, her voice tight. She pulled out her phone under the table. I knew she was texting Evan. That night, Evan was vibrating with anxious energy. He poured me a glass of wine and sat close to me on the sofa. "Tessa told me about the settlement," he said, trying to sound casual. "That is great news. Honey, but with that kind of money hitting the accounts, we need to be careful with taxes. You really need to sign that addendum tomorrow. It is just to protect you." "To protect me?" I asked, widening my eyes innocently. "Yes," he said, squeezing my hand. "So the IRS does not come after you?" I nodded slowly. "Okay. I trust you." Later that night, I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I checked the secure email on my phone. Malik had sent a new report. It was a digital smoking gun. He had traced the IP address used to access the Northgate Strategy bank account. It wasn't a VPN. It wasn't an offshore server. It was a residential IP address registered to Tessa's home address. And there was more. Malik had found drafts of invoices in the cloud fake bills for consulting services, totaling exactly $150,000, dated for next week. They were already spending money I hadn't even received yet. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. It was time to set the stage. I walked back out to the living room. "Evan," I said softly, "I have been thinking. Since we are starting over, we should celebrate. Let's host a party, a big one, on the rooftop of the Clarendon Hotel. Invite all your friends. Invite Tessa. I want everyone to know we are back together." Evan's face lit up. He loved an audience. He loved showing off his success and his obedient wife. "That is a fantastic idea," he said. "I will make the calls." I smiled back at him. He thought he was inviting guests to a victory lap. He didn't realize I was inviting witnesses to a crime scene. Fraudsters always make one fatal mistake. They think they are the smartest people in the room, right up until the moment the lights turn on. Most people know me as Brianna Kessler, the quiet compliance analyst who drives a mid-range SUV and clips coupons for detergent. That is exactly how I designed it. My legal name is Brianna Caldwell. I am 33 years old, and I am the sole beneficiary of a legacy trust that my father built in the shadows of the private logistics industry. Years ago, after a kidnapping attempt that nearly compromised our family, my father liquidated his public assets and moved everything into a blind trust. He taught me one rule: be boring, be invisible. If you look like prey, the predators will reveal themselves. I always believed Evan met me by accident in that coffee shop 3 years ago. I thought he loved my dry humor and my obsession with spreadsheets. I was wrong. While Evan was at work, I spent the morning combing through a hard drive Malik had mirrored from Evan's laptop. I was looking for financial infidelity, but I found something far worse in a deleted items folder. It was an email thread from 4 years ago, dated 6 months before we met. It was addressed to a broker at a boutique firm that specialized in distressed asset recovery. The subject line was not romantic. It read, "Caldwell's successor signature confirmed." My heart hammered against my ribs. He had not fallen for me. He had hunted me. Malik confirmed the theory an hour later via an encrypted chat. Evan had briefly consulted for a private equity group that did not buy companies. They bought access. They hunted for the keys to dormant family fortunes. Evan had realized who I was, likely through some slip-up in a credit database, and had spent 4 years positioning himself to get the one thing my father had locked away: my signature. The plan became terrifyingly clear. He did not just want to divorce me and take half the house. He wanted to use the divorce proceedings to force me to sign a power of attorney disguised as a settlement asset transfer. Once he had that, he would not just take the $150,000 from the accident settlement. He would use my authority to unlock the Caldwell Trust, drain it into offshore accounts like Northgate Strategy, and then leave me to face the IRS and the SEC as the one who authorized the transfers. He was setting me up to be the fall guy for a multi-million-dollar embezzlement of my own money. I suddenly remembered the chilling line from the car speakers. She signed it already. I had assumed they were talking about the divorce papers, but they weren't. I scrambled to my safe box and pulled out the digital archives of every paper I had signed in the last year. I scanned through the refinancing documents we had executed 6 months ago. Evan had been in such a rush that day, claiming the interest rates were about to spike. I found it on page 42, buried between a termite inspection waiver and a lead paint disclosure. It was titled "Spousal Consent and Asset Delegation Addendum." To the untrained eye, it looked like I was granting him permission to speak to the bank about the mortgage. But in the fine print, in dense legal block text, was a clause that granted temporary unrestricted power of attorney regarding all external asset verification. He already had the key. He just needed the divorce decree to validate the transfer window. I stared at the paper. My hands stopped shaking. A strange calm washed over me. It was the cold, hard clarity of a person who finally sees the entire board. I was not afraid anymore. Fear is for people who do not know they are being hunted. I was no longer the prey. I was the one holding the match, and I had just realized that Evan was standing in a room full of gasoline. "You want my signature?" I whispered to the empty room. "I will give you a signature." I picked up my phone and dialed Corinne. "It is Brianna," I said. "He is not just a cheater. He is a corporate spy. And I know exactly how we are going to burn him down." Corinne handed me the single sheet of paper. To the naked eye, it was identical to page 4 of the asset delegation addendum Tessa had emailed me. It had the same Times New Roman font, the same justified margins, and the same header. But the text was different. It was not a transfer of power. It was a sworn affidavit stating that I was signing the accompanying documents under duress, and that the contents had been misrepresented to me as a requirement for tax compliance. "This is the bait," Corinne said. "You have 3 seconds to make the switch. If you miss, do not sign." I arrived at the co-working space at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was one of those places with exposed brick walls and espresso machines that cost more than my first car. Evan loved it. It screamed modern success. He was sitting at a glass conference table with two of his friends, the same ones who had laughed in the background of that phone call. They were not there to support us. They were there as witnesses to his victory. Tessa sat at the head of the table like a presiding judge. She had the documents spread out in a fan, organizing the kill. "You are late," Tessa said, tapping her manicured fingernail on the stack. "We need to get this filed by 5 o'clock or we lose the tax benefit for the quarter." I sat down, clutching my large tote bag to my chest like a shield. "I am sorry," I said, letting my voice tremble. I just got so nervous driving over here." Evan reached over and smoothed my hair. His touch made my skin crawl. "It is okay, babe," he said. "We are just taking care of the boring stuff so we can focus on us." I looked at the paperwork. The addendum was right on top. Tessa had highlighted the signature line in yellow, a beacon for the idiot she thought I was. "Can I just read this one part?" I asked, pointing to the paragraph about the duration of the power of attorney. "Why does it say 18 months? That seems like a long time for a tax adjustment." Tessa sighed loudly, rolling her eyes at Evan's friends. "It is a fiscal year overlap. Brianna," she said, speaking slow and loud as if I were a child, "if we do not cover the full spread, the IRS will audit the joint filings." "You panic too much," Evan added, flashing that winning smile. "Let me carry the burden. You just sign, and I will deal with the accountants." I nodded, biting my lip. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, I will sign. But I think I left my reading glasses in my bag. The print is so small." I pulled my large bag onto the table, placing it directly between me and the document. It was a bulky leather tote, big enough to block their line of sight for just a moment. I rummaged inside with both hands. "I know they are here somewhere," I muttered, under the cover of the bag. My left hand slid the real page 4 off the stack and into the side pocket of my purse. In the same motion, my right hand slid Corinne's affidavit onto the table, perfectly aligned with the rest of the stack. "Here they are," I said, pulling out the glasses and dropping the bag back to the floor. The swap had taken 2 seconds. I put on the glasses. I looked at the paper. I was looking at my own declaration of their fraud. I picked up the pen. I did not scribble. I signed my full legal name, Brianna Caldwell, with clear, deliberate strokes. I wanted there to be absolutely no debate later about whether it was my hand that held the pen. "There," I said. Tessa snatched the paper away before the ink was even dry. She did not read a single word of the text. She only looked at the signature. She looked at it with the hunger of a wolf that finally has the lamb in its jaws. She slid the paper into her leather portfolio and snapped the lock shut. "Good girl," Tessa said. In the corner of the room, a man in a gray suit who had been introduced as a tax consultant adjusted his laptop. It was Malik. He had not said a word, but I knew the red light on his recording software was blinking. He had the audio of their lies. He had the video of the meeting. And now, he had the timestamp of when they accepted the affidavit. I stood up. My knees felt like water, but I forced a smile. "I am going to head home," I said. "I have a headache. Go rest," Evan said, already turning to high-five one of his friends. "I will see you tonight." I walked to the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of them celebrating their own destruction. I leaned against the metal wall and exhaled. "It is done," I whispered. They thought they had just secured a fortune. They had actually just notarized their own confession. That evening, Evan was not at home. He told me he was working late to clear his schedule for our fresh start, but social media tells a different story if you know where to look. I found him tagged in a photo on an Instagram story posted by a junior associate at his firm. They were at a private cigar bar downtown, a place that required a $5,000 annual membership fee. Evan was holding a glass of scotch, his face flushed with the arrogance of a man who believes he has just pulled off the heist of the century. My phone buzzed. It was a secure notification from Malik. Check the breakdown. It is not just you. I opened the file. Malik had traced the inbound transfers to Northgate Strategy LLC. I expected to see only my money, but there were other streams. Small, jagged amounts coming from accounts belonging to people with names like Esther and Robert, people born in the 1940s. He is stealing from the elderly, I whispered, my stomach turning. He is targeting seniors without children. I scrolled further. Malik had circled a figure in the background of the photo from the cigar bar. It was the same man I had seen sitting in the VIP section of the rooftop party I organized. He was older, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. On his lapel was a distinct gold pin shaped like a trident. I forwarded the image to Corinne. Her reply came within 30 seconds. That is Marcus Sterling. Sterling Private Equity. They specialize in hostile takeovers of family-owned logistics firms. Then came a second text. Evan is not the brain. He is the delivery boy. The final piece of the puzzle snapped into place, and it was heavier than I had imagined. This was not just about the $150,000 from my accident settlement. That was just Evan's commission. Next week, the Caldwell Trust. My family's trust was scheduled to vote on a merger that would reshape the shipping infrastructure of the entire eastern seaboard. As a co-signer, I held a blocking vote. If Evan had my power of attorney, which he believed he had secured this afternoon, he could walk into that meeting and cast my vote. He could authorize a leveraged buyout that would strip the trust of its assets and funnel millions into Sterling's pockets. He wasn't just divorcing me. He was selling my birthright to the highest bidder. I moved through the house like a ghost. I did not pack a suitcase, that would be too obvious. Instead, I packed a go bag of the things that actually mattered. I retrieved the original birth certificates, the hard drives containing the backups of my life, and my passport from the back of the linen closet. I gathered the physical evidence from my home office, every scrap of paper I had not already given to Corinne. I replaced them with dummy files, stacks of old utility bills, and junk mail that looked important until you opened them. I was finishing up when I heard the garage door open. I immediately shoved the bag under the bed and threw myself onto the mattress, curling up into a ball. Evan walked in a moment later. He smelled of scotch and expensive cigars. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, like a shackle. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice thick with feigned concern. "I am just so tired," I mumbled into the pillow. "I feel like everything is falling apart." "Shh," he soothed, stroking my hair. "Do not worry. You did the right thing today. The paperwork is filed. We are going to be safe." He lay down beside me, pulling the duvet up. He was asleep within 5 minutes, his breathing deep and even. He slept the sleep of the remorseless. I lay awake in the dark, listening to the rhythm of his breath. He shifted in his sleep, draping an arm over my waist. He murmured something into the darkness, a drunken, sleepy confession intended for no one but himself. Tomorrow. It all ends. I opened my eyes. The room was pitch black, but my vision was perfectly clear. Yes, I thought. It ends. Earlier that evening, Corinne had sent a courier to deliver a sealed package to a contact she had at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It contained the audio recordings, the forensic accounting of Northgate Strategy, and the affidavit I had signed proving intent to defraud. The trap was not just set. It had already been triggered. Evan was sleeping on a landmine, and he was dreaming of a victory parade. The text message from Evan arrived at 8 in the morning. It was brief and commanding. "Meet at the downtown office. Suite 400. We need to sign the final papers to keep this clean. He thought he was summoning a defeated woman to her execution. He was wrong. I dressed with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. I did not wear the pastel cardigans or the soft fabrics Evan preferred. I put on a navy blue tailored suit, the kind I wore when I had to tell a CEO that his company was violating federal sanctions. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I applied no blush to soften my cheeks. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see a wife. I saw an auditor. When I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the conference room, the stage was set exactly as I expected. Evan was at the head of the table. Tessa was to his right. Two of his drinking buddies were lounging in the back, smirking. And there, sitting silently near the window, was Marcus Sterling, the man with the trident pin. He looked bored, like a man waiting for a transaction to clear. Evan did not even look up as I entered. He tapped his phone, and I heard the familiar chime of a call connecting to a speaker. "Watch this," Evan said to the room, his voice booming. "She will walk in, cry a little, and sign whatever I put in front of her. It is almost too easy." He looked up then, expecting to see me crumbling. Instead, he saw me standing at the foot of the table, stone-faced and dry-eyed. The laughter from his friends died in their throats. They realized, perhaps a second too late, that they were not watching a comedy. "You wanted an audience." "Evan," I said, my voice steady, "now you have one." Before he could respond, the door behind me opened. Corinne Vance walked in. She did not knock. She did not apologize. She simply walked to the table and flicked her business card onto the polished wood. It spun and landed perfectly in front of Marcus Sterling. "I have a question," Corinne said, her voice cutting through the silence like a razor. "Who is representing who in this room?" Evan stood up, his face flushing red. "This is a private meeting between my wife and me. Who the hell are you? I am her attorney." Corinne replied, "And this is Malik." Malik stepped out from behind Corinne. He placed his laptop on the credenza and connected it to the room's main monitor. The screen flickered to life. It was not a divorce settlement. It was a flowchart. "This is Northgate Strategy, LLC," Malik said, pointing to the screen. "Incorporated 6 months ago. The primary funding comes from joint marital accounts, but the secondary funding comes from 3 elderly individuals in Florida. And here are the fake invoices generated from an IP address at Tessa Kessler's residence." The room went dead silent. The projection showed timestamps, amounts, and digital fingerprints. It was undeniable. "This is a marital matter," Evan shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "We are just moving assets for tax efficiency." "No," Corinne said. "This is wire fraud. This is conspiracy. And this is forgery." Evan slumped back into his chair. He looked at the screen, then at Tessa, who was hyperventilating, and finally at me. He looked at me as if he had never seen me before in his life. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, dawning horror. "Who are you?" he whispered. I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the wood so I could look him directly in the eyes. "I am the person," I said softly, "that you thought would not read the fine print." I placed my phone on the center of the mahogany table and pressed play. The volume was set to the maximum. The boardroom instantly filled with the ambient noise of a crowded bar, followed by the undeniable sound of Evan's voice. "I am finalizing the divorce. She signed everything." Then came the laughter, the cruel, braying laughter of the men sitting right there in the room. Then came Tessa's voice, sharp and greedy. "Just make sure you do not forget the asset clause." Evan stared at the phone. The color drained from his face until he looked like a wax figure. The friends in the back stopped shifting in their seats. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I reached into my bag and pulled out the document I had signed yesterday at the co-working space. I slid it across the table toward Evan. You thought you were collecting a power of attorney, I said, my voice steady and low. Read the header. Evan looked down. His hands were shaking so violently the paper rattled against the table. Affidavit of misrepresentation. Corinne read aloud, her voice ringing like a bell. A sworn statement that Brianna Caldwell was coerced into signing documents under false pretenses. You did not file a transfer of power yesterday. Evan, you filed a confession. Tessa let out a sound that was half gasp, half scream. She lunged for the paper, but Malik was faster. He clicked a key on his laptop. At 2:15 yesterday afternoon, exactly 12 minutes after receiving the document, an attempt was made to access the Caldwell Trust portal using the signature on that page, Malik said, pointing to the screen. Since the document was actually a fraud alert, the system flagged the attempt. You proved the intent to defraud. We have the digital chain of custody. Tessa collapsed into her chair, covering her face with her hands. She knew it was over. She had betrayed me for money, and now the money was the very thing that would put her in prison. Marcus Sterling stood up, smoothing his expensive suit. He looked at Evan with pure disgust. I have no knowledge of these activities, Sterling said, attempting to distance himself. This man is merely a contractor. Sit down, Mr. Sterling. The security agent at the door said, We have your emails authorizing the setup of the Northgate Shell Company. You were using Evan as a disposable glove to handle dirty money. Now, you are both going into the hazardous waste bin. Evan looked at Sterling, then at me. The realization hit him. He was not a partner. He was a patsy. I stood up. I looked down at the man I had married. I felt nothing. No love. No hate. Just the indifference one feels when looking at a broken appliance. You wanted a divorce so you would have free hands to steal. I said, I agree. I am granting you the divorce, but you will have plenty of free time. Inside an interrogation room, Corinne stepped forward. We are filing for an immediate freeze on all assets associated with Northgate Strategy. We are also submitting this evidence to the district attorney. This is no longer a civil dispute. It is a criminal investigation. Evan stood up, stumbling slightly. He reached a hand out toward me, his eyes wide and desperate. Bree. Wait, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Please, we can fix this. I did it for us. Can we just talk privately? I looked at him one last time. Answer one question. I said, Do you love me or do you love my signature? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He could not lie? Not anymore. I slid my wedding ring off my finger. It felt heavy. Like a shackle I had been wearing for 18 months. I placed it on the table. It made a sharp clack against the wood. Keep it, I said. You are going to need the bail money. I turned and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard Tessa sobbing and Evan shouting at Sterling, their alliance dissolving into chaos. I did not look back. I walked out of the building and got into my car. I rolled the windows down. The air was cold and biting, but it felt clean. I drove out of the city, the wind whipping through the car, washing away the stench of their greed. I did not win because I was rich. I did not win because I was powerful. I won because I paid attention. And as I merged onto the highway, I realized that the laughter from that Bluetooth speaker finally belonged to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Evan's karma. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please subscribe to the channel Victoria Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people. See you in the next episode.